10 people in history more evil than Jeffrey Dahmer. Now, if you don't know who Jeffrey Dahmer is, he's all the craze right now, nearly 30 years after, just over 30 years after his arrest. He was a mass murderer in the 70s, 80s, and 90s who dismembered his victims and put their remains in vats and did stuff unthinkable to their bodies before and after death. If you want to see it, look at the series on Netflix or look on YouTube, Jeffrey Dahmer. Viewer discretion is advised. If you're a child, I would not recommend watching this video at all, as it's quite gruesome. It's about murder and probably about stuff like cannibalism.
Better than, worse than, who's to say? It's safe to say that everyone on this list has done some horrific things. Here are the top 10 evil people in history worse than Jeffrey Dahmer.
Now, before we begin, I've got a bone to pick with this channel because they tend to have very clickbaity titles. They say like 10 things that will happen this year, and then they say, oh, they predicted it 25 years ago, so will it happen this year? So just be a bit mindful of this channel, just to put that out there.
In our number 10 spot, we have Israel Keyes. Israel is quite a prolific serial killer and
His
truly
keys
is
are in
a
Israel,
terrifying
maybe.
person. While everyone on this list is horrible, Israel is particularly scary because of the fact that he had no MO or type. He just killed at random. In fact, he was so prepared for these random crimes that he left kill kits all over the United States so that he would be prepared for whenever whoever he chose crossed his path. It isn't quite clear how many of these crimes he committed, and many missing persons reports that are still open could potentially be linked to him. It is said that Israel had a sort of admiration and obsession with other prolific serial killers like Ted Bundy or Robert Hansen. He even said, quote, "I probably know every single serial killer that's ever been written about. It's kind of a hobby of mine." In March of 2012, Israel was finally apprehended and was to stand trial for his crimes, but unfortunately, while awaiting trial, he went on to take his own life. He left behind a note and a drawing of 11 skulls, which led authorities to believe that this may be the number of victims that he had.
See, I like watching documentaries on serial killers, but I ain't gonna go fucking do it. Like, you've got to be some sort of twat to go out and kill. Like, you got to be demented the mind.
Richard Chase. This evil person is said to have taken the lives of 6 people within the span of a month between 1977 and 1978. That's a lot of people in a very short amount of time, which is so terrifying. Before his crimes, Richard's life was already full of terrible stories and horrific acts that had him spending time in mental health institutions before his crime spree started. While at these facilities, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, but after going through treatment and beginning medication, he was deemed to no longer be a threat to society, and he was released into his mother's care. Here's where things take a turn for the worse. Instead of helping take care of Richard, his mother instead weaned him off of his medication and got him all set up with his own apartment. Nice. Really helpful and very cool of her. Initially, when he moved into the apartment, he had roommates, but eventually they all moved out and he was alone, which is when things really got wild. He began killing various animals, which he would then eat raw, sometimes mixing the organs with Coca-Cola and then drinking it. After this, he would unfortunately go on his killing spree, which had horrific details and would only end when he was startled by a visitor at the home of where his final crime took place. He fled the crime scene but was later caught and stood trial. Although there were many attempts to have him be spared of the death sentence, in the end it didn't work. In December of 1980, Richard was found passed away in his jail cell after taking too many of his prescribed medication.
Let him suffer, man.
Charles' story really starts off shortly after he moved to the United States on a student visa.
In fact, NG in Welsh is ng or nha. Nha, yeah, that's the one. NG, nha. That's actually a thing in the Welsh dictionary. NG, look it up.
He dropped out after his first semester, and soon after he was involved in a hit-and-run accident. He then tried to avoid prosecution by enlisting in the United States Marine Corps using false documents that stated that his birthplace was within the United States. He was arrested by military police a year later for stealing automatic weapons, and then somehow he escaped custody, headed back toward Northern California, and this is where he met Leonard Lake, who is another real piece of work. Charles did end up going away and serving a bit of time, but it was only 18 months, and he was back with Leonard, and that is when the two started their crime spree together. It is believed that together the pair took the lives of somewhere from 11 to 25 different people. When Leonard was caught and brought in for questioning, he sneakily took a cyanide pill he had hidden in his jacket, and he took his own life, but Charles did end up standing trial.
What is the point?
He was convicted for 11 of the killings, and he remains on death row at San Quentin. In our number 7 spot today, we have Rodney ALCALA. Rodney is a horrible monster who was convicted and sentenced to death for 5 killings that he committed in California California from 1977 to 1979. He also received an additional 25 years to life after pleading guilty to 2 other killings in New York in 1971 and 1977. Rodney got away with his crimes for a while because he wasn't the top of the lists of suspects, because he was said to be a, quote, charming photographer. Rodney is often referred to as the dating game killer because of his appearance on the show, with what we now know about him is absolutely horrifying. What's crazy is that he actually won the show he was on, but the episode's bachelorette refused to go on a date with him because she found him too creepy. This is just a reminder to always trust your instincts. It isn't exactly known just how many victims Rodney had. It is potentially thought that it could be much higher than the number that he was convicted for. In July of last year, Rodney passed away in prison at the age of 77. In our number 6 spot today, we have Scott Erskine. In early life, Scott began to commit very violent crimes against others that I really can't even talk about here on YouTube. When he was around 17 years old, he spent around 4 years in prison for one of his crimes, but then he was paroled after the 4 years, and he immediately began committing crimes again. In 1993, Scott invited a woman who was waiting for the bus into his home and ended up holding her hostage for several days. After letting her go, he was quickly arrested, and he ended up being sentenced to 70 years in prison. This is when he had to submit DNA to a database, and in March of 2001, that DNA was matched when the cold cases of the unsolved killings of Jonathan Sellers and Charlie Keever were reopened. In 2004, a jury sentenced him to death, and 6 days later, he was transferred to San Quentin. In an interesting turn of events, Scott did die on death row, but it wasn't due to a scheduled execution. Scott died a couple of years ago in July of 2020 after contracting COVID-19.
Good. See what I mean when I say you gotta be careful with this channel? That guy, yes, he killed, but that is nowhere near as bad as Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer killed, what, 17 people? Literally chopped their bodies up, beat off to their dead bodies, had sex with their dead bodies, and then when they were passed out. And, like, the mutilation he put them through, you know, even with the young boy as well, with Jeffrey Dahmer. You're telling me this guy that killed, like, 2 people and then died, like, 15, 20 years later is worse than him? Like... I'm sorry, I might be in too, like, thing about it, but, like, fuck, yeah, I hate clickbait shit like that. I hate it so much. Just tell me 10 murderers in history that could be slightly similar to him, but aren't as bad, or, you know, you could debate you're as bad.
In our number 5 spot today, we have Tommy Lynn Sells. Tommy Lynn Sells was an American serial killer who was responsible for 22 confirmed deaths, but the authorities have said that they know that there are more. I actually watched an interview that he did, and one of the aspects that really creeped me out about him while watching him talk about his crimes is how you can tell that he committed these crimes because he wanted to. He just wanted to, and he liked it. In the end, Tommy was caught because of someone who survived his attack in the most incredible way. She was able to go on and give such a good description of him that it led to his capture, and she was able to positively identify him. Not only did she save her own life, but who knows how many others in the end. Tommy and his crimes were deemed so horrific that he did end up receiving a death sentence. While in jail, he said that there wasn't one day that went by where he didn't think about, quote, the one that got away. Tommy's life came to an end when he was executed on April 3rd, 2014. In our number 4 spot today, we have Gary Ridgway. This horrible human being is also sometimes known as the Green River Killer, and his crimes took place somewhere between 1982 to potentially as recent as 2001. He was convicted for 49 crimes, but confessed to an unbelievable 71, which makes him the 2nd most prolific serial killer in the United States in terms of...
Hang about. 71 murders. 71. That's a 7 and a 1. You know, if I ever even accidentally kill one person, that would live with me for the rest of my goddamn life. How can you do 71? Jesus! That is astronomically large for that's people.
In our number 3 spot today, we have Chester Turner. Chester is an American serial killer who, on April 30th, 2007, was convicted of taking the lives of 11 women in the Los Angeles area, and on June 19th, 2014, he was convicted of 4 more that they were able to tie back to him. He has been referenced to by prosecutors as one of the most prolific serial killers in the city's history, and if you know Los Angeles' history with things like that, that is not something to take lightly. I mean, like 4 of these were Los Angeles. Due to
Well,
other
fair
crimes
enough.
that
Yeah,
Chester had
that's a
committed
bad
where he was
place to
caught,
live if
he
you're
had
in
to
them
submit a
times.
DNA sample. This sample is what ended up leading authorities to solving these other horrific crimes that he had committed. At the time, the cases were turning cold, but thankfully Chester being caught for the other crimes is what allowed them to have a break in the case. In the original trial that led to conviction, Chester was sentenced to death, but at the following one in 2014, he also received an additional death sentence. In our number 2 spot today, we have Albert Fish. Albert is one of the oldest people on this list, but that does not mean his crimes were any less horrific than anyone else's. Dubbed the Brooklyn Vampire or the Moon Maniac or even the Boogeyman
Brooklyn Vampire is a cool
Albert
name.
was a terrible human who did awful things. In the early 1900s, Albert was arrested, tried, and convicted for killing and eating 3 people, but the horror was not over there. No, Albert began to claim that although people knew about 3, the number was closer to 100, and he even claimed that he had some in every state. It's disgusting. To make matters even worse, as if it already wasn't terrible enough, this deranged lunatic also sent a letter to the mother of one of his victims. He detailed everything about how he lured her and the rest of the horrific things that occurred afterwards.
Man, that must
like
have
how
been
he proceeded
rough
to eat
to
her over the course of 9 days. Yeah, this is just another person that I'm not sad at all that they just don't exist anymore. That's perfectly fine by me. In our number 1 spot today, we have Quincy Allen. Quincy Allen is a man who went on a crime spree between July and August of 2002, where he took the lives of 4 people. His crime spree was actually inspired while he was in prison serving time for stealing a vehicle. It was here that a fellow inmate decided to start recruiting others and told them that he could get Quincy a job as a mafia hitman. When Quincy was released, he decided to buy a shotgun so he could start practicing. Man, I wish he showed this kind of dedication to literally anything else. Quincy started off his horrific crime spree on July 7th, 2002 by attacking a 51-year-old homeless man who was sleeping at the time. Luckily, this man was able to survive the attack. His crimes continued until he was arrested on August 14th, 2002. After his arrest and trial, Quincy received a sentence of death and is still on death row awaiting execution. His sentencing did not deter him from the criminal life, however, as in 2009, Quincy, along with another inmate, planned an attack on a correctional officer at the prison they both reside at. In the end, the guards had to use rubber bullets to subdue the pair. The correctional officer they attacked thankfully didn't succumb to his injuries, but he was forced to find another job, as after the attack he was suffering from PTSD, and all the charges pertaining to this specific attack were later dropped by prosecutors who suggested that there was no point in trying someone who is already on death row. This did, however, get Quincy and the other inmates stripped of all of their privileges at the time, which included outside recreation, visitation, phone use, and canteen items. Quincy was intended to be executed on January 8th, 2010, but there was a stay of execution that was accepted, and as of July 26th, 2022, literally just like a few months ago, Quincy's death sentence was overturned. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlov.
I must have... Wait, no, don't worry about it. You're telling me that this fucker that killed 4 people is number 1 on the list with a guy that... I know 4 people is a lot. 1 person's a lot when it comes to murders, but you compare it... You think 4 people getting killed is worse not only cannibalism, but 71 murders by 1 person. This is blasphemous. This is why I don't like this channel. But you know what? I'm still going to react to it because it's content and views and clicks. And you know what? The woman's going on my screen right now. That's what all them are doing in their coffins or in their graves, or if they've been massacred and desecrated and they're now cremated and shit. Then I hope that their ashes are all going out as well, because they can fucking die. They can get out of this life and get as well. They can go into space for all I care. I don't give a shit. I'm being nice to me. How we doing? What are your thoughts on this video? Leave them in the comments section down below. Leave a like, start a movement today by subscribing, and I hope you all have a great day. Don't do any murders, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Ciao, ciao.